to click like, subscribe, the bell notification, and whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Tokunomics. This is the show where rubber suits meet the balance sheets, where explosions are not just done for drama, but for payroll, and where we're going to answer the question of how much does it cost to make a Tokusatsu series? I'm Cruellica Kain, your lovely host, and today we're starting a series to discuss the economics of Tokusatsu. We're not going to be discussing the lore, or the power scaling, or even who's going to win in fights. The goal of this series is really to talk about the cost of doing business for Tokusatsu. And in truth, this comes at a right time because Tokusatsu, namely Super Sentai, is in the middle of a public autopsy. So let's continue on further with why Tokunomics exists. And that is, truthfully, it was born out of frustration. With the end of Super Sentai being rumbled upon and then announced. Fuck. Alright, honey, you're gonna have to cut. After I say public autopsy, cut to now. And I'm going to start my second section. Stupid phone. So why does this new series Tokunomics exist? And truthfully, it was born out of frustration. Tokusatsu is a genre that has been around since the 50s. Possibly even earlier, but I am taking it back to the 50s because of the kaiju films. But it really came from when Super Sentai, a franchise that has been around for decades, that has gone through multiple cultural shifts, public discourse, production changes, global licensing, is ending. And one of the things that I noticed throughout this discussion and official announcement of the end is that the Super Sentai fandom is doing what all fandoms do best, trying to find the villain to blame. And I understand and I appreciate whenever something that you love is going away, you always want to find the reason why. And sometimes the reason why doesn't always meet what you believe it is. And sometimes you feel as though it is coming from an element of they just don't want to tell you the truth. So social media has been filled with dozens of accusations: corporate greed, Western interference, the usual suspects where the monsters are obvious and the moral lines are unclean. So the problem is, the real world doesn't fit into this box of Tokusatsu where you have a hero and you have a villain. Unfortunately, with where things are going right now, there is no villain. It is, at the end of the day, contracts, margins, risk management, and unfortunately a lot of uncomfortable math. So let's take that on forward of what's the cost of doing business. So when we think about it, we see what's on our screen and we don't necessarily think about everything that goes into it. First, I'm just going to blow your mind real brief. And that is, Tokusatsu is expensive. It's not Hollywood blockbuster expensive like the MCU, but it is very expensive. So you're paying for a lot. And I'm just going to run down some of the things that you're paying for and why this can get very expensive. So we're paying, or Toei is paying, let's just call a spade, Toei is paying for practical effects. We're also paying for specialized stunt teams, suit actors, pyrotechnics, custom props, miniatures, tons and tons of suits, and crews that are specifically trained on something very few industries do. So while there are tokusatsu shows in other countries, even in the United States, we have different elements of special effects shows. In truth, the genre of tokusatsu is very narrow, which is why you'll see a lot of the writers work on a variety of different franchises, be it Super Sentai, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Garo, so on and so forth. You'll also see the same thing with suit actors, stunt teams, things like that. Toei has the biggest grip on tokusatsu by having both Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. So teams that work on one may very well work on the other. And we are also in a digital age where a lot of shortcuts have to take place with CGI and other types of digital special effects. So every item, or every explosion for that matter, is a line item on a balance sheet. It is one item that goes out for cost. And then you have to think about this being done weekly. Every episode is a logistical puzzle held together by duct tape and deadlines. And then you have new layers of modern expectations. We have better high-resolution equipment. We also have globalization. And before you think about, well, there's none in America, I'm not speaking about worldwide globalization. I'm speaking about just any kind of globalization that's taken for Super Sentai to appear in other countries. And throughout history, and it may still be occurring to current day, you have Super Sentai appearing in Korea, Philippines, China, Brazil, maybe other countries that have easy access to tokusatsu. So you have to think about those localization elements. And alongside all of that, you have to think about streaming. Take into account right now you have Kamen Rider streaming on Tokusatsu. So you have to have that business relationship with a local streaming platform. And not just for Tokusatsu, for wherever that may air in the world, but others. You also have to think about faster turnaround then. If you're going to be streaming it rather than just airing it on TV, you have to have a faster turnaround because you need to make sure it goes from television to streaming in a very short period of time. And then you have a lot of performance metrics that are in Tokusatsu today that weren't there when everything started 50, 60, 70 years ago. Because now you have to think about the elements of who is going to be watching, how is it going to be consumed, where is it going to be consumed. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of industries have to think about how much the cost is rising versus the revenue coming in. Is it equaling or balancing, or is one element higher than the other? And this is where my business background is going to come in. A little bit about your lovely host here is, unlike my husband, Kaiju, who is more so on the artistic spectrum, which is never a bad thing. I love him for it, and I have so many friends who are. I am that black soul business person. I have 4 college degrees in business. I have been working in different elements of the business world for more than 30 years. And I know age-wise that includes my childhood because my stepfather had a number of small businesses. My mom worked for a lot of small businesses outside of the family side of it. My grandfather was a very business-oriented person. My uncle was a very business-oriented person. So I have been around business. I've had to learn about what business is, how it's done, the purpose of it, and sometimes when you have to know when to hold them or continue, or when you have to fold them and change it up. So That's why I want to make sure that I'm giving my best when sharing on any of this knowledge or any of this information with you. So now we want to talk about a little bit of a sensitive section, and that is Hasbro not the hero, nor are they the villain. I know that's going to be hard to hear, because let's get into a little bit of the background of why Hasbro is being blamed. So for anyone who is unaware, which I'm assuming everyone watching this video is aware, Power Rangers came into the United States around 1993. I say around there because I heard about Power Rangers in 1992. And so, and that wasn't even the first foray that Saban or anybody had brought anything Tokusatsu to America. But that was the biggest and the most notable. Power Rangers has been around for more than 30 years now. And with it, it has gone through a few different iterations. It has had Saban days, Nickelodeon days, Disney days, and Hasbro days. I might not be getting the Nickelodeon versus Disney order correct, but the purpose is it has seen multiple iterations as well as cultural shifts in and of itself, where it started just as similar as traditional tokusatsu in Japan started, with duct tape and deadlines, where they had to chop up a series and make it into something that American children primarily would enjoy. So it has lived through that. And when Hasbro bought it, I want to just go through some elements here. So if I look like I'm reading from a page, apologies, but there's some things to think about. Hasbro, in and of itself, is a multinational corporation. They have many franchises, many toy lines, many interests that go across everything. They have My Little Pony, they have G.I. Joe, they have Transformers. They have a lot that's a part of the American cultural narrative. So when Hasbro acquired, for a significant amount of money, Power Rangers, it was just another day of doing business. The problem is they do not have an obligation for nostalgia. They have an obligation to produce products or to hold on to contracts however they see fit. And I want to make sure I highlight that. What we love Super Sentai for, and what many others love Power Rangers for, that is not the responsibility of Hasbro for. They're there to protect their stakeholders. Not their executives, not their employees, but their stakeholders, because their stakeholders at the end of the day are the ones that fund their organization. That doesn't mean they're innocent. That doesn't even mean Hasbro is a good company. I am not championing Hasbro. There are many practices they do as an organization that I don't agree with. And I will stand on a pedestal and fight them till the end of the day. However, they are not the villain. Any business, not just Hasbro, any business has to make decisions on ROI, brand synergy, and long-term licensing viability. Where are they going to make the money? They spend a lot of money acquiring a license, whatever that license may be, as an organization, namely Hasbro. They have to make sure they can make that money back. And that means the toys have to sell. That also means that the content has to justify the production spend. And any international properties, namely Super Sentai that they use for Power Rangers, have to perform outside of their home markets really well. But here's, once again, uncomfortable math. Hasbro did not invent the financial strain Tokusatsu is under. They also inherited it. So if you think about it, Tokusatsu has been going through issues for decades. Power Rangers has been going issues for years. They've seen so many dips, so many valleys, peaks and valleys, that they've inherited this problem. When they bought Power Rangers from Saban, they inherited the problem of it. So they stepped into an ecosystem that was already struggling when they took on Power Rangers. So Toei, who owns Sentai, has always had, for quite a few years, struggling costs because they're rising, production pipelines that are aging, shrinking broadcast windows, and a fan base that wants more cinematic quality. Plus, as there's been complaints over the years, they also make a lot of their money on toy sales locally and maybe internationally from fans like us. And if those toys aren't selling, if people are not watching the show, and all of their marketing investments are not doing anything, then what can we do? So at the end of it all, blaming Hasbro alone is absolutely emotionally satisfying. I understand there was a moment in time when it first was released, I did see how people could blame Hasbro. And truthfully, I can still see how blaming Hasbro makes sense for this. However, it is kind of economically lazy. Hasbro is not at fault for the woes of Toei when it comes to Super Sentai on the cost or the dynamics of how much it takes to produce the show and what revenues they're not seeing. For Toei, this was not a single bad decision on continuing to make Super Sentai. This was a years and years decision that bulked up because the cost to produce was not meeting the demand of the audiences. People were tuning in maybe, but they weren't buying the toys that connected with it, or they weren't buying enough of the toys, or Toei and Bandai saturated the market with too many toys. And while Hasbro brought in revenue for Toei by having the Power Rangers license, by producing those Power Rangers toys, by producing those shows in America based on Super Sentai series. That's a small piece of a pipeline that if any company based their success or failure on that piece of a pipeline, they were already in trouble to begin with. So what am I going to be discussing for Tokunomics if not vilifying Hasbro? And that is going to be a lot of fun. I know a lot of fun for me. I'm hoping a lot of fun for you to be able to see a little bit more of the background of, one, how much it costs to produce an entire Tokusatsu series. And I will say from a lot of my research already, it's pretty astounding how much it actually costs. And one, I was amazed, and two, this is in American dollars, so I'm not going to be basing it on Japanese yen. So even from American dollars, it's skywards of tens of millions at times. We're also going to be talking about where the money goes and where it doesn't go. Like what money is used for throughout the production process. We're going to be talking about some of the other sides of it, such as why merchandising matters. It is important to have a lot of great marketing, a lot of great toys, a lot of great appearances. I know I'm saying great, but all of that works hand in hand to make sure that what you're producing brings back revenue and profits. And then how international licensing does matter. So I will discuss elements and even possible lost revenue. And I will admit this is more conjecture, this side, versus a little bit more of the details on the cost of the show. But how international licensing can help with boosting the production costs or the revenue or the profit of either a particular series or into the bucket that usually is put together for future series. And then finally, what it would realistically take to reboot or reinvent a tokusatsu series in Japan. And being that we're at the end of Super Sentai, I know a lot of questions are about how to bring Super Sentai back. And so I'll talk about some of that as we go along too, of if they were to bring Super Sentai back, what would the cost look like compared to what we have today versus what we would have tomorrow, so to speak. And we're going to talk about a lot of different franchises within Super Sentai. The top 3 that I can name are going to be Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and also Ultraman. We'll also look at Garo and any other tokusatsu series that you may have interest in or that I find throughout my research. And then lastly, we're going to be keeping this more focused on context, not to support a corporation such as Toei or Hasbro or Subaraya or anyone else. The focus is to really look at just the context of it. We're going to have fun, we're going to have humor, but we're not going to have outrage baits. We're not going to get mad that one series costs more than the other, or this series costs more but it failed. Well, this series, which cost barely anything, was the greatest thing ever. We're going to really just talk about how those series were financially put together, and we'll look at it as, was that cost worth it? And I think where I'm going to start, sadly I can't start with Gojuger because it's incomplete, so there's a lot of added production costs that were put into it after the fact with the actor change. But I'm going to go with the series prior to it, Boom Boonger. I'm going to start with that first and then go backwards, unless anybody wants me to skip around. And I'm going to focus on different series to see why they were fiscally a success or an economic failure. And then highlight what that looks like for the show, which may have been a fan success or a critical success, even though the show failed in other ways. And there's a few series out there that have that exact thing, which they are a critical darling, but a financial success, a financial loss. And then lastly, I want to talk about why I'm doing this. Not just why Tokunomics is what Tokunomics is going to do, but why I'm doing this. I've been a fan of Tokusatsu for over 20 years now, and admittedly this is an art form that brought me and my husband together. We started dating and he began watching Tokusatsu, shared it with me, and at first I thought, oh, this is another boyfriend, so to speak, that is going to watch this nerdy stuff that I have to sit in on, because that's usually how it works sometimes. But after watching it and seeing the love and passion that came for Tokusatsu, the creativity, the storytelling, I really appreciate what it does. And because I appreciate what it does, I want to talk about it in a way that works for me. I am not a creative in artistic standpoints as Kaiju is, or Silver Quill, or so many of the other YouTubers out there. But one thing I know really well is business and the structure of doing business. How good acting can help raise a series up, how good acting can help them with their careers, how head writers can sink a show even if the toys are the greatest thing ever. So I want to talk about the costs of doing business, the financial costs, the intrinsic costs, and the emotional costs, because those are something that I know and I can express great. Now, with that said, I definitely am looking forward to any engagement that everybody has, because I don't want this just to be me talking to a camera about business, unless that's what people want. So I might change it up at times and do live streams versus pre-recorded videos, but I wanted to do this pre-recorded video as an introduction to the series and to say thank you for the opportunity. So with that said, have a great day. Enjoy the series that you like. Feel free to hang on to your emotions about what you feel is going down when it comes to the loss of Super Sentai. It's not a bad thing to be into your feelings. It's human nature. But at the end of the day, let's take toxicity out of it. Right now, there's way too much toxicity in the world, and that's what we need a little bit less of so that we can have fun. And with that, thank you. I'm Cruellica Kain. This is Tokunomics, and I'll see you next time. Bye.